All right. Well, I hope the school board and the school budget seriously reconsiders tapping into that, maybe finding other ways. As much as sports are good for the school and the morale, I don't believe they're part of the education in the state of New Hampshire. Maybe some things could be cut there. I hate to see that sports, something like that gets put in front of families' health insurance. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Yes, sir, Mr. Kastner.
Dean Cascaden from Bristol. I have two questions. The first question regards the default budget. Is the change in health insurance and the cuts to staff included as part of the default budget?
Yes.
Can I ask the follow-up why that is? I've always thought the default budget was supposed to be the program that we did last year carried into this year's money. So why wouldn't we include the health insurance and not cutting the staff in the default?
Since that is a school board function, I'll let you answer, or if it's you or Mary.
Because the default budget definition is so widely open to interpretation, the board has voted and decided that where it says minus one-time expenses, that if they made a recommendation in their proposed budget to say that they were going to cut a position, why would they say they needed to leave that in the default budget? So basically what they did was they said if they recommended to cut a position, then it was a one-time expense for the previous year and they were not intending to bring it back anyway, so they cut it. There are people that are weighing in on both sides of that argument. We had a workshop with the director of DRA and our attorney, and they were both on opposite sides of that, and that was the vote that the school board took when they created that default budget last Monday night.
Is that open to re-looking at, or is that what the default budget is? You
I
can't
guess I would
re-vote
let the board answer that. No, we've done it. We've done this for the last couple of years. We're following a similar practice that we have the last couple of years. They took a vote Monday night. I can't answer for the board whether they would revisit that or not.
All right. It just would seem that if the board, if you were to increase a position, you wouldn't put that in the default budget. So it seems kind of interesting that if you decrease a position, it goes in. My second question is, what sort of analysis have you done as far as retaining and hiring staff in the positions that you've changed the benefits for? Have you looked at districts around here, and are we going to get a loss of the good people who are working in those positions, or are we putting them at a level that would be in competition with like local districts that they go to work with? Have you done any analysis on that? Or okay, so there's a possibility that we're going to lose good staff because their pay is cut. All right, thank you.
Yes, ma'am.
Hi, Beth Matson, Bristol. I may have missed this earlier, but you have done a lot of work, obviously, but the definition of where these teachers are coming from and what positions are going to be cut, I'd like to hear more in depth on. Plus, I need to understand exactly, even though you've got the same percentages for the support staff of what the district will pay and what they will in healthcare, it doesn't tell me exactly what their healthcare benefits are going to be. I'd also like to understand whether or not you've made looked at the number of support staff that are year-round employees versus 180-day employees, whether there would be any changes or you've made accommodations for those individuals versus that, to see that. I really need to have more in-depth knowledge of what you went through in 5 minutes.
Okay, where the cuts are currently proposed to occur, the methodology that we used to determine where cuts could happen.
I'm sorry. I just wanted the Budget Committee to address that because
answer
it's the Budget Committee's proposal tonight,
Well,
right?
actually, it was the board's proposal and the Budget Committee agreed with their numbers, so they can answer that or we can tell you how we arrived at that. So either way, you want to go ahead and answer?
Well, I'm hoping the Budget Committee, since they supported those numbers, understands where those numbers came from.
Okay.
Ms. Matson, I'm looking for my sheet. I'm not finding it here very quickly. But as we all know, various plans offer different amounts of co-pays, out-of-pocket expense, and so on. In the past, the school district had a very generous plan with not much co-pay and not much out-of-pocket expense. And a big cost of that, it was not only taking part-time people. There's not a lot of employers in the real world who give full health insurance.
I understand that. I want to know exactly what is currently being offered under this budget by the budget committee's work.
Sure, if you got it.
This is the plan.
It's the plan option 6. Yep. Mr. Rossner's going to put it up. It has a 15.
I hope this is helpful. If what's on my computer comes up there in the next second or two. I don't want to do that. Yeah. Is this visible? Okay. So the column all the way on the left, it says current plan. This is the current plan that the employees are on. It's called Matthew Thornton Blue. You can see what the prescriptions copays are, 10, 20, or 45, depending on the type of prescription it is. You can see the office visit copay, $5, specialist visit, $5, and ER copay, $25, et cetera. And you can see the costs. These are the gross costs before the employees kick their portion in on that 95, 92, 88%. Excuse me, 95, 92, 88%. What the plan in this budget, what's built into this proposed budget is to offer option 6 all the way to the left. Right, sorry. Left, right. Yeah. I'm learning. That option 6 is what would be offered to the support staff on the existing tier of 95, 92, 88% copay. So the prescription copays stay the same. The standard visit goes from $5 to $15. A specialist visit goes from $5 to $40. The ER pay goes from $25 to $250. And the big savings is achieved through what's called a plan deductible, meaning that the first $1,000 or $3,000 per family needs to be out-of-pocket expensed by the employee before the insurance actually kicks in. And that's on that number gets reset every year. Is that the information you were looking for?
Yeah.
Okay.
Is that in addition to an increased premium that they have to pay?
Well, the premium for these numbers below are the premium for FY13 that we're discussing, that have been locked in. So if we go back to the current plan, earlier in the evening you heard about a 0.1% decrease in the premium of the existing plan for the employees covered by the existing plan, such as members of the collective bargaining agreement. And that's that 673.28 or 1346 or 1817, those are reflective of that 0.1% decrease. And the plan option, the cost for option 6 for next year is the 510 for an individual, 1,020 for a two-person, or 1,377. That is per month on a 12-month, yeah, on a 12-month basis.
So you have about 2,000 less than that.
So I'm going to offer this up because it was asked by a gentleman earlier, if you don't mind, and that's how the structure would work. I hope no one thinks I'm taking liberties here. I just want to. The question was, how's the new plan going to impact the support staff and financially? And what this number shows is under the revised structure, how much an employee's portion would be versus the district's portion for the different types of plan, single, two-person, family, based on the employee's wages. So, for example, if we take this area here, this where it says 5%. This is reflective for employees making between $0 and $15,000 a year. They have the 5%. The district pays 95%. If the employee had a single plan, the employee portion would be, and these are annual numbers, okay? $306 for the year for the employee, $5,800 a year for the district. Yes.
Can you make the percentage a little bit bigger? I think my eyes are.
I can try and, yeah.
See if it says 70%, can you change it just a smidgen?
Yep, I will try.
That will help us in the back.
80? How's that?
Maybe one more.
One more?
I didn't realize. Okay, thank you.
How's that? Okay. This gives you a percentage breakdown of what the annual cost would be to the district or the employee based on the employee's wage, where they fit in the copay structure for their wages and what type of plan. So for the gentleman who was if he was speaking earlier about a family plan and the employee makes less than $15,000 a year and they continue to maintain a family plan, the employee would be paying $7,800 a year for that family plan, the district would be paying $8,725.
Plus the $3,000 deductible.
Right, and as I say at the bottom, that doesn't include the deductible of $1,000 per person or $3,000 per family. And the reason these numbers are the same in every column, the two-person and family, is because the structure is based on the district covering, subject to the 5A12, covering a single employee or half the increase to a two-person plan and none of the increase up to a family plan. I hope that answers the question. I can leave it up if people want to talk about it.
And I want to continue to explain, to answer Ms. Mattson's question about how it was determined which employees, and that was not a budget committee decision, that was a school board decision. The budget committee, as you may have read in their September 13th meeting, set a budget goal of $20 million. So as the board was developing their budget, and they asked us to come up with some different scenarios, we did. And I know Mr. Westfall refers to comparing us to the Messinic district. We went and took a field trip down to Messinic. Messinic offers no health care to any of their support staff. So we were looking to say where our employees, especially our support staff, we have people who have been here for over 25 years, and several of them have just a long history with us. And since 1963, they've had a full family plan, because in 1963, those cost $300. Recognizing that many of the taxpayers can't afford their own health insurance and their taxes are going up, and there's just this frustration with health insurance nationally, the board, Dan and I originally proposed that we would draw a dividing line on who gets the change in the impact to health insurance to those employees who are only working 30 hours, up to 30 hours or more for 180 school days. The board then made a motion, I believe it was in the December meeting, to say that they were going to make this change effective for all support staff. That was a board decision. And again, the budget committee met last week on January 3rd. They were not all there at the time. The vote was 4-2 to accept the school board's recommended number to come in tonight's hearing. Different members of the budget committee are here today, and they will meet after this meeting to decide whether they still intend to cut it to the $20 million, at which case we would not be able to offer health insurance to any support staff. We would have to close Danbury, we would have to move the 5th grade to the middle school, and we would have to eliminate sports, or the budget committee, and the budget committee will have to identify any further cuts they want to make below the $21,597. So when you ask the budget committee how they arrived at the decision as to give health care, they hadn't discussed that. They accepted the board's discussion, which has been tough, it's been painful, it's been month after month looking at everything and saying, if we are to be held to a number that other districts are being held to, we've got to make some decisions that they've made. And it's a very, very, as you can well imagine, it's a very difficult decision for everyone. So does that answer a little bit more about the process for you?
I can understand the process. I just need the budget committee to understand that if budget committee is going to present these numbers, they need to be able to discuss those numbers. And the big thing that I have a question for is that I guess as a public member, what I need to hear from the budget committee is, when you make those cuts, what is the impact, and whether I agree with those numbers is my issue, not yours. But I need to be able to be explained to me. Because when you just say it's the same percentage, and then you start to look at what this impact is at $7,800, then a $3,000 deductible, then to take a child to the doctor's is $40 visit for a copay, then it is a significant impact. I understand the way how you arrived at that, but I need the budget committee to be able to defend those numbers so that we understand what they did. And I just need my other questions answered about the teachers, et cetera.
And I was totally prepared to answer your question. You might recall that I said, I have that on a piece of paper. I don't keep it all up in my head. However, I will tell you, since I don't see anybody else out here, in the real world, part-time employees. Is this lady that's standing up wanting to speak? Yes. Okay. Go ahead then. Please identify yourself.
Autumn Dawn of Alexandria. Can somebody tell me, do you have any plan or strategy on moving the 5th grader to the middle school? Because my son right now is the 6th grader in middle school, and some of the stuff he come home, he hear from the 8th grader, and as the parent, I'm not ready to move in my kid up there. First of all, and secondly, ICT, which is the computer class. My daughter have a class once per week. There's one computer teacher at the middle school teaching all 3 grade for computer. How is he gonna put in 100 kids and expect them to have a computer class every single week?
Thank you for that question. Yes, there is a plan. Some of you may recall that a few years ago, the 5th graders were moved to the middle school and eventually moved back. My understanding is it wasn't done with a lot of thought. Dr. Ross has assured us that there is a game plan. I hope that they will soon be having a meeting with parents of 4th graders.
If that's the case, I would like to hear the game plan tonight before I make the decision.
Can I finish answering the question before you interrupt me? Thank you. The plan is that the 5th graders will be segregated, so they will not be mixing in with the other classes. The middle school has a surplus of space right now. They only have 288 students, and there can be a certain part of the building that is just for the 5th graders. Bear in mind that your child could be very well learning a lot of the stuff that they're learning on the bus, where the kindergartner...
Excuse me, my kids don't take in the bus.
Yep.
I drop them off every single morning, and I pick them up every single night. And are you gonna tell me, how are you, when I brought them up at 7:30 in the morning, how are you gonna segregate my 5th grader kid against an 8th grader? Is there a plan?
There is a plan.
I would
There's
like to see the
plenty-
plan.
And there's plenty...
You can tell me all you want, but if there's no plan, then that's not working for me.
And there's plenty of time between now and next September for that plan to be perfected.
No. The vote is in February, so it's not next September. You can tell me, you cannot tell me that you wait until next September and come up with a plan. I work with budget every single day. I cannot tell my board, I plan to cut $500,000. I'll tell you next year. I cannot do that. You have to come up with a plan. If that's what you propose, then I want to see the plan.
Do you have any additional comments?
We have begun preliminarily, we've developed schedules, we have, it is my job as a superintendent to take the money that is given to me to run the school district when the school board and the budget committee and then the voters, after the deliberative session, come up with a final number. It is the voters' job to have a deliberation about that, and at the deliberative session to talk about what you value, what you'd like to add, what you'd like to take apart. I'd like to go on record as saying that I never came in here and said, oh, I want to cut all this money, and here's how I want to do it. When asked to cut money, what we've done to our best ability is work together as an administrative team to say, how can we maintain the integrity of our academic programming? There are going to be values that are going to be different in people's minds. The process that I promise is that we will meet with parents, with teachers, with the administration at the middle school. If at the end of this process, this is still the model, we will listen to concerns. We have a schedule right now. I know there are a lot of concerns out there, and we could talk all night about what they are, but we will work very diligently to address those concerns. We will talk about what parents feel that they would need to be assured of their child having safety. I do have a plan for the academic piece of it already, and the plan to address concerns is to have a forum, to listen to those concerns, to work carefully through those. If you feel that that is something that you would like to address at the deliberative session and say we would like to add some money back in order not to have that happen, then you as a citizen have a right to do that and see what the vote comes out on that. If after that happens, the school board has a bottom line number, you also have a right as a citizen to approach the board, ask them to reconsider, and they do have unfettered authority to move line items, money from one line item to another. Bear in mind, we haven't seen what the bottom line is yet. And if there are further cuts, as some citizens are here tonight probably to advocate, if there are further cuts, then we may be even having more drastic cuts to be made and to talk about that. So I can't, like I said, at this point in the process, and it is a long process, we are talking about ways that we can achieve a certain number in the budget and what that target will be. It is I feel it is my ethical, if not professional obligation to make sure that we do the best job we can to help parents feel that their children are safe as well as well-educated. And at the end of this process, whatever money these communities, these 7 communities, afford to us, we will do our level best with that.
I'm sorry, you are not recognized right now. If you want to speak after everybody else has spoken. Those who want to boo, if we had an officer, I would ask for you to be removed. I'm trying to be respectful to you. She had left the microphone. The rule usually is you allow everybody to speak first, and then you take people who want to speak again. So it is unfair to those who have not spoken yet to let somebody repeatedly come back to the microphone back and forth. So if you will wait your turn until the other people have spoken, then I will recognize you. Yes, ma'am, in the red.
My name is Margaret LaBerge. I live in Alexandria. I am on a fixed income. I realize that some people have not spoken for those of us on a fixed income. My taxes have gone up $500. I've never had a child in the school district, although I have taught in the school district, and I am here to say that we need to speak up for us. We do not, surrounding towns do not provide the health care that we provide. I'm sorry that you may have to pay the same amount that I pay now. I'm sorry to hear that. But I think we need to have cuts. I think we need not to have a classroom of less than 10 students. From my understanding, going to the meeting, we have 8 such classes. I could be wrong with that number, but I understood her to say we had 8 classes of under 10 students. That's ridiculous. I can't even begin to I can babysit more kids in my house. I don't need a college graduate to do that. The other thing I need to say is I would like to see our budget between 18 and 20 million. It doesn't matter to me how you do it. It doesn't matter to me what educational resources you have to move around. All I'm saying is if we don't start keeping this, nipping it in the bud now, the fact of the matter is we will all be moving out of town because we will not be able to afford the taxes. That's what I'm here to say. Thank you.
Yes, sir.
My name's John Thuen. I'm from Bristol. And I certainly would like to suggest that the most important thing here is indeed the students and the training in what's phonemically perhaps correct, but grammatically not, reading, writing, and arithmetic, or reading, writing, and reckoning as it was once known. Towards that end, I have a question. A few years ago, I was traveling over to Lebanon on a daily basis, and I was always meeting the late bus coming out into Danbury. The question I have is this: first off, do we still have a late bus program? Okay. The second question that goes with that, is there some revenue that comes in from doing that? And if so, how much of the cost of that program does it cover?
Is that the federal program, Marie? Yeah. There's a federal grant program for after-school programs, but my understanding is that transportation is part of a match that the local district is. I know exactly what you're talking about. I saw a school bus dropping off a child at 6 o'clock at night in New Hampton this week.
Mm-hmm. And then I'm curious, does the money cover what it costs us to run that program?
The money for the program is entirely funded through grants and through fees that parents pay for some of the after-school programs. And in order to qualify for the grant, we needed to make some in-kind matches. So the in-kind matches that we make are the late bus and one of the after-school coordinator's salaries, which is, what, $25,000 this year? It's $25,000. So because we made that match, we were able to get hundreds of thousands of dollars, which provides tutoring, provides after-school care for parents who work, and again, parents pay fees for some activity fees for some of the programs. So the only expense to the district was the necessary in-kind donation in order to qualify for that grant.
Okay, I can appreciate that. And I do have one other question. About 4 or 5 years ago, I remember hearing that a fair number of our teaching staff were at, if you will, level 13 on our 12-level program. Is that still the case?
Last year, we were 50-50. We had about half of our teachers were at the top step and half of them were at different steps. Last year, we had 5 retirements. This year, we have 3. And for each of the 5 retirements plus 2 other I think we had 7 teachers who left the district last year. For each one of those, I hired a staff member at entry level. And this year, we have 3 retirements, and they are not being replaced per some of the cuts that we're making.
Okay, thank you.
If you wanted to look that up on your handout, that is on page 23, the 1490 series. 1490, yes. Yes, ma'am.
Wendy Cantwell, New Hampton. Could either Marie or Dan remind me of the percentage that we are allowed to get up and amend at the deliberative session on Saturday the 4th?
10%.
It is
of
10%?
the Budget Committee recommended
Okay.
number.
And that, on page 2 of the handout that we received tonight, that could possibly be the number that's the big blank line in the operating budget? If you, working off the 21,597 that you said you may continue to speak about after we leave tonight? Okay,
Yes,
okay.
It's on,
it's not page 2.
yes, it is.
Article 7, operating budget,
Oh,
page 2.
Article 7, okay, you're talking about the articles, okay. Yes.
Okay. If me, propose hypothetically at Saturday, February 4th, a 10% increase on that 21,597, does that reinstitute the 15.4 FTEs, the 5 paras, reorganization of DES, and reorganization of the middle school?
No,
What will?
potentially nothing.
What's,
And let
what's-
me- let
what
me-
is,
let
what
me-
is,
let
what is the
me-
dollar, what is the dollar amount that we need to amend Article 7 to read for the voters to vote on in March that will get rid of the discussions about moving the 5th grade and reorganizing DES and getting rid of 15 teachers?
I think that would have to be roughly current spending. If you're saying to undo every single thing that's been suggested, would be $23.8 million. And people who got the big increase in their property taxes would get a big increase again, and they wouldn't have a reduction in the taxes. But even if it was amended to add the 10%, the school board could still decide that it's the wiser path to do certain things and do them anyway and let that money lapse and not be spent. Just because a number's voted in does not necessarily mean that it has to be spent by the school board.
I understand that the school board has the discretion to do with whatever number they're given at the end of March. Right now, we have a choice of 21.5 and 21.7.
At this point in time.
At this point in time. And my opinion is that neither one of those offer much hope for our district, our fifth graders, our teachers with no salary increases, and our $700,000 worth of support staff. I think you're going to lose a lot of valuable employees.
Thank you. Mr. Oger?
Archie Ozier from Bristol, and I would have a number of comments. I did a little thinking prior to coming tonight, and I thought this lady's question may very well come up. So I developed some scenarios so that we could have some kind of understanding what the dollar figures might be. So let's suppose the Budget Committee comes in with a $20 million budget. Now, at the deliberative session, the voters would have the choice to accept $20 million or increase it by some percent, up to 10%, resulting in a $22 million budget. Okay?
Or reduce it by 10%.
Indeed. That can go down, but I'm very doubtful that they'd go less than the 20 million. At any rate, the other scenario now that would then go to the deliberative session and they can go up or down. If at the deliberative session it stays at 20 million, you go in March, and that's what you have for a budget unless they vote it down and the default budget comes in at 21.7. Let's take the case where the Budget Committee and School Board are currently in agreement, where the budget's 21.7 million roughly. If they go to the deliberative session and nobody raises anything, in March you would make a choice between 21.7 for the budget and the default budget, which is 21.7. So there's not really too much of a change there. Now, let's take the case where the 21.7 goes into the deliberative session, and the voters choose to go up 10%. Then the voters in March will have a choice between a budget of 23.9 million or the default budget of 21.7. Now, that's a significant choice for voters. I have my idea about how the voters will vote in March if they are given that choice. But, you know, there are all kinds of scenarios. I have given you the bottom line that you would see in March, and I've also given you the top line, if you will, as to what could happen. Other comments. I want to say thank you to the board. Thank you to the Budget Committee. You have worked with some very stressful kinds of ideas and concepts to get the budget down where it is. It's not easy. And there are a lot of people that are going to be affected, but I think the public overall has said we got to have some control. And for those people that believe that, I stand here and say thank you again for going in what a lot of people think is the right direction. Now, if I could, there seems to be a terrible amount of concern about fifth graders going to the middle school. I think it was 1990, the middle school was formed. It was grades 5 through 8, and we never lost a student while I was there as assistant principal and as a principal. And until it changed, we never lost a student. They survived it. Now, I'll be the first one to tell you, though, that I very much recommended that fifth graders not be in with with eighth graders. And that's part of the reason I think that the board voted to go and have the fifth graders return to their local schools. I think that's a better arrangement educationally. But is it impossible for them to be in middle school 5 through 8? Absolutely not. And it can work, and the schedule can work fine. I know I did it for 5 or 6 years. Now, another point that I will point out, and I'll not be popular for saying it with the board or the budget committee, in fact, in your budget, you do have some salary increases. Yes, you do, and I pointed them out the other night on the sheet that I handed out Monday night. They're not significant, but there are salary increases. And, you know, that was the statement made, there's no salary increases. That's not quite true. Okay? So I'm sorry but I think it's important that we be very much upfront. Now, the other thing that I have a concern about, when you look at the 2000 series, that's called the support segment of the budget. Now, there's an inequity that is taking place in the 2000 series with respect to what is happening to the health insurance. And, you know, I will point out to you on the backs of the pages where the 2300 series and the 2400 series, look on the back of those pages and see the percent that the administrative group, how much their health insurance is reduced. Now remember their support staff. You'll see the page says their health insurance premiums were reduced 0.1%. Now, if you have a single plan, it's about $7,000. 0.1% reduction is not a significant change. And to be equitable, it seems to me that perhaps all support staff should be treated the same way. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Ozier. Dr. Ross is going to answer that
Archie,
point.
that you are using a different...
I didn't ask a question.
Well, I'm just going to clarify for some confusion that may be out there. Archie has used the word support staff, and he is using the accounting code for support services for students, which would include administration. The operational definition of support staff, we have a support staff handbook, just to be clear that those individuals that are currently in the board's definition of those who are going to be affected by this health care would include our paraprofessionals, secretarial staff, food service workers, and custodians. So just so that people are clear as to where that definition, that discrepancy is. And I just conferred with Mr. Rossner because I know we have not given anyone any salary increases, and Mr. Ozier said there's an increase. When, in our teacher's contract, if a teacher advances an educational level between a bachelor's degree and attains a master's degree, by contract, they would go to a different track. So there are a few track changes that we contractually need to provide for teachers who have earned an advanced degree. So thank you for raising that, and there's nothing hidden here. That's the reason that you might see an increase in that line.
Thank you, Dr. Ross. Mr. Corrett, I don't believe this gentleman has spoken first, and you've spoken before, so...
No, I have not. Oh, I'm sorry. I asked a question at the start of the meeting.
Yeah, you asked a question. So then I'll go to you, and then if nobody else new gets up, I'll go back to the young lady there. Yes, sir.
Good evening. I'm Brandon Kernan. I'm from New Hampton. I have twin fourth graders right now in the New Hampton Community School, and a kindergartner who isn't in the school district right now because we eliminated full-day kindergarten right when my kids entered the school district 5 years ago. So, you know, the same kids that were looking to move on to the middle school prematurely, we also were the ones that we cut the half-day kindergarten, or cut full-day kindergarten to half-day kindergarten too. I wanted to speak, though, about a couple of things. First, primarily the fifth grade move to the middle school next year, which obviously would affect my kids. I think that would affect both the quality of their education, and I don't think that's come out enough. I think it'll affect their safety, and I think also affects their health. And first of all, with the quality of education, one of the cost savings by moving them up to the middle schools, it's been cited that you're going to cut an ICT position, an information communication technology position, from the elementary school. And so by moving 4 or 5 classes from the elementary schools, you can cut a whole teacher's position. Well, that's going to affect all the classes. You know, everyone's going to get less education, or the teachers are going to be less prepared to provide that education. So it's not an efficiency, it's a lowering in the level of education. You're also going to be affecting the quality of education by taking these kids in the 5th grade that right now are with special ed teachers that have had the benefit of the training, the curriculum of elementary school in the reading program, and the math program, and the science program, and the social studies program. And you're going to put them in the middle school where they haven't been trained, and the costs aren't in the budget to train them, to get them up to speed to do that. You're also ripping those kids away from the Title I funds that really don't affect us locally immediately in our tax base, and you're putting them into the middle school where those Title I teaching funds aren't available. So, you know, it's not about efficiency, it's about diluting the quality of education to a large degree. I also, I really think we've overlooked the safety aspect of it all. You know, I really respect a lot of the work that goes into presenting information to the committees, but when I was handed this flyer that said there was 0 violent incidents at the middle school last year, that's just unbelievable. I mean, there had to be a really cute definition of violent for someone to come up with that statistic. There is violence in a middle school, and there's more violence in a middle school than there is in an elementary school. And I'm not looking for my kids to just survive, my kids that were writing thank you letters to Santa Claus last night to just get through the middle school process. I'm looking for them to have good attitudes and a safe environment, and to not be exposed to things that the 8th graders these days, 8th graders have access to internet and a lot more media than they did 20 years ago. I'm not looking for them to have that information right now. I'm looking for them to be little girls as long as they can. So, you know, I think there's a lot more that needs to go into thinking about this process and really realize that there is an effect on kids. And I guess I want to end up with just commenting on the paraprofessionals. You know, I guess you can debate, should they get compensated with the benefits that they have because you're looking at what other people are getting, and maybe there's a debate to be had there. I feel like I want good quality support staff around my kids, and I know the difficult jobs the paraprofessionals have and really doing the most challenging work in the school district, so I support the benefits. But even if you were to change the benefits, it's really inhumane, it's wrong, it's mean to not transition it, to not grandfather it, to just do it to these people who are neighbors and part of our community and have been with us for a long time and do so much more than they have to in a given day. So I really would ask that you think about that differently. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Correct?
I'd like to offer an observation and speak regarding the support staff also. I can't help but correct the previous speaker who told you that the middle school opened in 1990. His mind is slipping. It was 1989. As I've seen people struggle in the difficult economic times, I note that a lot of cost saving is cost shifting, and we see it at the state level as the state has tried to have a balanced budget, and we see it at the local level. But as I look at the $700,000 for the support staff cut and the cost shifting that is taking place, I think a previous speaker spoke of a personal situation, and you see what a drastic change it is, that this $700,000 is an important piece of a reduced budget, but it's going to produce a lot of grief for a lot of people. And I just question if the savings in tax bills have to be quite that large, and if we couldn't give a little more consideration to the support staff. And I think someone else had pointed out that many of these people have worked years and in a dedicated way that most people just don't understand. And they are certainly people that give much more than what they're given in their paycheck. And so I certainly plead for them that you do something to do a little more.
Thank you, Mr. Corrett. And I'm glad that you brought up 1989, when the change was made to the high school and the middle school being separate. And before I go on to the young lady, I'm just going to bring up what the picture was in 1989 in the Newfound School District. We had 1,278 students, which is just a little bit under the 1,309 that were projected for next year. The school budget was $5.9 million, and 900 of the 5.9 million was debt service for the brand new high school. So the net was only $5 million for roughly 1,300 students. There was 164 staff members. We have 1,310 students. We have just under 300 staff members and a $24 million budget. And I realize that, and I don't, if you want to make a comment, please be recognized and don't be making comments from the audience. I've let a lot of information be given out without the other side being given, and I'm going to get to that very soon to start talking about the impact. I mean, as sports staff, yeah, we're hitting them, but there's taxpayers that have been being hit very, very hard by the spending. In the last 7 years, I'll very get shorter, in the last 7 years, the spending in this district has gone up 53%. The CPI increase in that 7-year period was 11%. And by the way, the enrollment in the Newfound School District has gone down 15%. So when you add those factors together and look at the ever-increasing excessive increases that have been being put on people who are on limited income, it's time for a readjustment. Just looking at the 15% reduction in enrollment alone justifies a $20 million budget. When you add in looking at the data analysis of the school districts, if you take an average of spending of those 15 school districts, justifies a $20 million budget, if not less. So I know it's a sensitive issue, but anyway, I'm going to come to this lady, and then I'll come back to Sharon. Would you mind if some people who haven't spoken yet speak, or?
No.
Okay.
No.
Go ahead. Yes, ma'am.
Autumn Dawn of Alexandria. I just want to make a comment. I'm not sure whether the school board or the budget committee ever stepped foot into the school district, the school building, but we all know that math is critical for our kids. That's the reason why this country now ranking number 13 in the nation versus number 2 or 3 when I entered this country 20 years ago. Math is so critical, but we offer one day. What are they, weekly, once per week, or what are they for math? For us, 7th grader, they have week, one days per week?
No.
2 to 3 days per week, where most of the country, I just come back from Vietnam.
But they're double classes. They're a long class. It's a double period, 2 to 3 times.
A lot of time I'm questioning about the long period of time, because for kids who have a very short attention, 90 minutes class is a very long time for them to sit in there. Because my son is good at math, but there's a day he coming home and he say, I hate math. Why they make it so long? So I think it's at the school board or at the principal, you guys need to reevaluate it, how the block time work. Because it's just not working for some kid where their attention is so short, and you make them sit in class for 90 minutes.
Dr. Ross is saying that that is an area, no matter what happens with the budget, that they're planning on looking at, making some changes on. Yes, sir, right down here.
J.W. Cantwell of New Hampton. Thank you. I was wondering, other than saving money, what are the advantages of putting 5th grade in the middle school?
There are a number of advantages to being in the middle school. It would give increased access to chorus and band, the allied arts and computer. Right now, you only get it once a week with a traveling person. And there was a question earlier about how can you cut a position? Well, when you don't have somebody on the road going to 4 different schools to teach 5th grade, you're able to give a more comprehensive class, and they have access for better equipment and so on. Marie, is there anything you'd like to add to that? No? Okay.
And what are the disadvantages?
You know, to be honest with you, I don't really see that many disadvantages. Yes, you're not in your community school anymore, but when we've had a number of people contact us and say, let's go back to 1st through 8th grade in the communities. Well, there you're going to have 5th graders with 8th graders. If it's planned properly, I think it could be a real advantage. The class sizes, you know, would be, you know, similar. You'd have your same 5th grade teachers. It's not like you're going, and there's going to be all new teachers. The same teachers who are in the community schools teaching 5th grade right now will move along to the middle school as well.
Thank you.
Yes, sir.
My name is Miles Sinclair. I live in the town of Groton.
Somebody likes Groton.
My daughter. First question is probably the easiest. I was just curious what issue the school board's going to meet after we adjourn here tonight to address. Does it pertain in any way to what we're talking about tonight?
The school board wanted to send out a communication to residents, and they just wanted to have a chance to approve the draft that I put together. That's it.
Okay, thank you. The second issue I wanted to address is what is the status of the teacher's contract? It's my understanding their existing contract has expired.
The existing contract expires on June 30th of this year. During negotiations, the teachers declared status quo. They made some amendments to the existing contract as sidebars first, and then they declared status quo, which means they will not have a new contract. It will remain in effect. Currently, no raises, no steps, no changes other than the sidebar amendments just for language. And so they will be operating basically under the 2011-12 contract for the 2012-13 year.
Now, I mean, some of you already know my background. I'm a retired police officer from Derry. It was Patrolman's Union. I was very active in that for a number of years. And this perplexes me, this status quo designation, and I'm just really curious what the circumstances and motivation is behind that. Because, and I'm not quite done yet, Marie, if I could. Nothing prohibits you from entering into a contractual agreement, a signed agreement presented to the voters addressing these same issues. No wage increase, no changes in our benefits. So I've never, in my entire working life involved in union matters, heard of this status quo situation. Because if you're on an expired contract, which would occur on July 1st, it's already status quo.
True.
So what's the real deal?
That's exactly it. So we had the option, the school board's negotiating team had the option, and we sought some legal counsel, and there were some different ways we could go with this. We could not negotiate at all, in which case the contract would expire and it would be status quo, as you said. We could negotiate a new agreement and agree to a 0% step raise and a 0% cost of living, and we could put it on the warrant. And if we did, if the voters voted yes, they would get a 0-0. If the voters voted no, they would get a 0-0. And in essence, it would come out to be exactly the same. So we were informed that if they negotiated a successor agreement at 0-0, it would need to be updated with new dates that would have to go on the warrant. if they agreed to go status quo and keep the same dates as a 2011-12 contract and just let it expire, it will still be a 0-0. So in every single scenario, they will have exactly the same outcome. And we thought it would be quite confusing for a warrant to say, would the voters approve a 0% raise, a 0% cost of living, at a cost of 0% to the taxpayers? So which way, it just, either way, no matter how the vote came out, they would still end up with the same thing. So upon legal counsel advice, and I know the union talked to their advisors, and they said, if you make any change at all to any money issues, you have to have a warrant article, and they didn't make any changes.
But I think presenting it to the people would let the people understand that the teachers union was making a sacrifice and a concession because of difficult economic times.
Right.
And the longer I thought about this, I finally thought of a possibility why you might want to leave it that way. And the only motivation for that would be that when you do negotiate a successor agreement, it can cover this period and it can be negotiated such that there are retroactive pay increases.
That was never a consideration in any way. That was never part of the thinking. You hit the nail on the head when you made your first statement. The teachers came to the table and said, in light of our colleagues in the support staff who are suffering, in light of the number of people who are losing jobs with this much of a cut, we come to the table and say we are not requesting anything other than just to stay status quo, because why they were just being very magnanimous about it and humble about it. And that is exactly, and never once in anybody's discussion was there any talk whatsoever about a retroactive contract, whatever. Now, a couple of years ago, I think it was the 2007 contract, Mary, that failed at the polls, and then there was a special meeting and that failed, and then when they negotiated the 2008, they negotiated a contract that was 2007 through 2011. It was a 4-year contract with 0 for the first year, and I think there were double steps that were negotiated into that one. But there was no talk at all whatsoever about doing that this time.
But do you agree and recognize that that possibility exists? That door remains open?
Any possibility exists anytime there's negotiation, and it always goes to the voters to accept or reject.
And the only way to ensure that it was 0 and 0 would have been to negotiate that contract and have it presented to the voters. Because that would cover that period. Being status quo, future negotiations can address this time frame and make whatever agreements the parties ultimately agree to. And it can include anything.
If that's the case, nobody ever discussed that at all.
But again, that door remains open.
I think it remains open regardless. I think if they had a 2013, 12-13 contract 0-0, and the next contract, they could have said anything they wanted to. They could have said double steps.
But if, again, the contract was ratified and voted, the voters approved it, the 0-0, that would lock in that time period. You couldn't go back and renegotiate an expired contract. You'd have to initiate new negotiations for a successor agreement.
This contract is expiring at the end of this year, so it's expired. And at the end of next year, they have to negotiate a new one for the following year. There's nothing, it's done.
When you're on an expired contract, you can always address that in a successor agreement. We did that many times in Derry.
Maybe the police know something we didn't. I don't know.
Well, we went 3 years with no contract, 4 years with no increase, followed by 18 months with no contract, 2.5 years with no wage increases. And we addressed those prior years in those successor agreements. So I know that's exactly how it can work. Whether it will work remains to be seen. And I try to be a fair person, even when I was negotiating in Derry. And some of the comments made here, you talk about, the teachers being willing to make concessions, but what's happened here, and I have to admit, even in my view, being a conservative-minded person that I am, it's disproportionate and it's unfair, the burden that's being placed upon the support staff. They're being fed to the lions. And if the teachers truly cared about the support staff that assist them, they could have opened up the negotiations and address some concessions in their own health care plans. The The plan, the current plan that you had up there, pretty sweet plan. $5 copay for a doctor visit. Myself, on my wife's plan, we're paying like $25.